In a bustling city where skyscrapers touch the clouds and ambition fuels the daily grind, we meet our protagonist, Mark Reynolds. Mark is a name that resonates within the entrepreneurial circles, a self-made millionaire who has carved his niche in the tech industry. His journey began in a cramped garage, fueled by late nights and relentless determination. Over the years, he transformed his startup into a thriving enterprise, garnering respect and admiration from peers and aspiring business owners alike. What sets Mark apart is not only his keen business acumen but also his bold approach to decision-making. He thrives on risk. For him, every challenge is merely an opportunity wrapped in uncertainty. This proclivity has earned him both accolades and criticism. While some admire his ability to seize the moment, others caution that his impulsive nature could lead to recklessness. Yet, Mark is undeterred. He believes that fortune favors the brave. Mark's success story is punctuated by significant deals and partnerships that have propelled his company forward. His instincts often guide him in negotiations, allowing him to make swift decisions that others might ponder for days or weeks. He has become accustomed to the thrill of closing deals quickly, relishing the adrenaline rush that accompanies each signed contract. However, this rapid-fire approach has also sown the seeds for potential disaster. As we delve deeper into Mark's world, we see glimpses of his life beyond business, his passion for innovation, and his desire to make a difference in people's lives. He often speaks about how technology can empower individuals and transform industries. This visionary outlook has attracted a loyal following among his employees and investors who view him as a leader capable of steering them toward a brighter future. Despite these admirable traits, Mark possesses a blind spot when it comes to details, especially when it involves intricate contracts or legal jargon. He often relies on his gut feeling rather than meticulously combing through agreements before signing on the dotted line. Time is money, he frequently quips, believing that delays can cost him invaluable opportunities. This philosophy has served him well in many instances but leaves room for perilous missteps. Mark's confidence further escalates when he finds himself surrounded by like-minded entrepreneurs at exclusive networking events. Here, amidst luxury and ambition, he hears stories of groundbreaking ventures and lucrative partnerships. The excitement in the air feeds into his desire for growth and success. It is at one such event that an enticing business proposal lands in his lap, a deal that promises significant returns with minimal upfront investment. Intrigued by the prospect of rapid expansion, Mark quickly engages with the representatives from a renowned investment firm. Their pitch is compelling. They present a vision of innovation that aligns perfectly with Mark's entrepreneurial spirit. As discussions unfold, the representatives highlight their company's extensive resources and industry connections that could catapult Mark's business to new heights. Caught up in the moment, Mark envisions the glorious future ahead, a fast-paced trajectory toward greater wealth and influence. The stakes feel high but achievable. After all, he has navigated challenges before with finesse. The representatives assure him that this partnership is an opportunity he cannot afford to miss, a sentiment that resonates deeply with Mark's appetite for risk. As negotiations progress at lightning speed, Mark feels exhilarated yet slightly apprehensive. But when the time comes to sign the contract, doubts creep into his mind. Should he pause to scrutinize every clause? Should he consult with legal advisors? Time seems to slip away as he weighs his options against the potential rewards flashing before him. Ultimately, driven by a blend of confidence and urgency, he decides to proceed without a second thought. With a flourish of ink on paper, he seals what he believes will be another victorious chapter in his entrepreneurial saga, a milestone that will elevate him even further within his industry. However, as we will soon discover, this momentary lapse in caution will set off a chain reaction of events that will test Mark's resilience like never before. What unfolds next will challenge everything he thought he knew about success and what it truly takes to thrive in the unforgiving world of business. For now, though, we leave our protagonist standing at the precipice of opportunity, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the horizon. As Mark Reynolds navigated the fast-paced corridors of success, the winds of opportunity began to swirl around him. His tech startup had become a formidable player in the market, and with that position came the incessant pressure to innovate and expand. In an industry that thrived on disruption, stagnation was not an option. Every day, new competitors emerged, vying for attention and resources, each one eager to claim their stake in the rapidly evolving landscape. The tech conference season was in full swing when Mark first caught wind of the groundbreaking opportunity that would soon consume him. The event was bustling with entrepreneurs, investors, and thought leaders all eager to showcase their latest innovations. In the air hung a palpable sense of urgency. Everyone was searching for the next big idea, the next groundbreaking partnership that could catapult them ahead of their rivals. Amidst this atmosphere of excitement and competition, Mark found himself drawn to a presentation delivered by a well-respected investment firm known for its remarkable track record in scaling tech startups. Their reputation preceded them. They had transformed fledgling companies into market giants with impressive speed. As Mark listened intently, he felt his pulse quicken at the prospect of collaborating with such a powerhouse. The firm's representatives painted a vivid picture of what a partnership could look like. They spoke passionately about leveraging cutting-edge technology and vast networks to accelerate growth. The allure of potential profits was intoxicating. Forecasts suggested that within just a couple of years, Mark's company could see exponential revenue growth if they tapped into this new venture. It seemed almost too good to be true. In conversations with peers who had previously partnered with the firm, Mark heard stories of transformative experiences, businesses that had gone from struggling startups to industry leaders almost overnight. Each anecdote served to intensify his desire to seize this opportunity. He felt a powerful urge to keep pace with his competitors and not miss out on what others were accomplishing. With encouragement from his trusted advisors and a few colleagues who shared his vision of rapid expansion, Mark began to feel an overwhelming sense of urgency. They echoed his thoughts. If he didn't act quickly, he might lose out to others hungry for success. The pressure intensified as whispers circulated around the room about other entrepreneurs eyeing the same deal, further fueling his fear of missing out. As he left the conference that day, Mark's mind raced with possibilities. He envisioned what it would mean for his company, not just in terms of profits but also in terms of prestige and influence within the industry. He imagined attending future events as not just another participant but as a leader at the forefront of innovation and change. This vision ignited something deep within him, a driving force that urged him to take action. Back at his office, Mark gathered his team together for an impromptu meeting. He shared his excitement about the investment firm and their proposal, speaking fervently about the potential impact on their trajectory. His enthusiasm was contagious. Team members exchanged glances filled with hope and anticipation. They discussed strategies for capitalizing on this partnership, brainstorming how they could align their existing projects with the new venture's objectives. Yet beneath the surface of excitement lay an undercurrent of anxiety. A few team members hesitated, voicing concerns about rushing into such a significant commitment without fully understanding all implications. But Mark dismissed these apprehensions, attributing them to typical cautionary instincts that often plagued successful entrepreneurs. He believed that fortune favored those who acted decisively, a mantra he had internalized over years in the cutthroat world of business. As days turned into weeks, negotiations with the investment firm began in earnest. The representatives presented various options for collaboration that promised substantial returns on investment while requiring minimal upfront costs. An appealing proposition for any entrepreneur looking to scale quickly without risking too much capital. Mark's eagerness grew with each passing meeting as they discussed projections and potential milestones. He felt invincible. The promise of success loomed larger than any doubts or second thoughts he might have entertained otherwise. With pressure mounting from both peers and competitors alike, coupled with his own internal drive for success, Mark found himself standing at a crossroads, a moment filled with promise yet fraught with risk. As he prepared to seal what he believed would be a landmark deal for his company, he remained blissfully unaware of the hidden dangers lurking within the fine print awaiting him just beyond that momentous signature. The day had arrived. Mark Reynolds stood in the sleek, glass-walled conference room of the investment firm, surrounded by representatives who exuded confidence and expertise. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as they prepared to finalize what Mark hoped would be a game-changing partnership for his tech startup. He felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. This was the moment he had been working toward, a tangible step into a future filled with endless possibilities. The representatives laid out the contract before him, a meticulously formatted document that promised everything they had discussed: growth, innovation, and success. As they highlighted key sections, Mark found himself nodding along, captivated by their enthusiasm and the sheer potential of the deal. They spoke confidently about projections and milestones, painting a vivid picture of what was to come if he signed on the dotted line. He absorbed their words like a sponge, fueled by his vision of soaring revenues and industry prestige. Yet, as he glanced at the contract's pages, his eyes skimmed over the fine print, the legal jargon that often seemed to blur together in a sea of complex terms. In his mind, he rationalized that he could always consult with legal advisors later if anything felt amiss. After all, he had never encountered any major issues with contracts in the past. His track record reinforced his belief that he could navigate this landscape without too much scrutiny. He trusted his instincts more than legal formalities. The clock ticked loudly in the background as Mark's thoughts raced ahead. He could already envision himself at the next conference, sharing stories of triumph and how this partnership had propelled his company into new heights. With each passing second, the pressure mounted. He could almost hear the whispers of competitors eager to swoop in if he hesitated. The fast-paced nature of the business world demanded urgency, and Mark thrived on that adrenaline rush. Feeling invigorated by the prospect of progress, Mark turned back to the table where the representatives awaited his decision. The lead negotiator smiled encouragingly, his pen poised above the contract as if it were an extension of himself. "We're excited to have you on board," he said, projecting an air of assurance that made Mark feel even more confident about his choice. "This is going to be a transformative journey for your company." With those words ringing in his ears, Mark took a deep breath and picked up the pen. It felt heavy in his hand, symbolizing more than just ink on paper. It represented ambition, dreams, and perhaps a touch of recklessness. He glanced once more at the pages before him. Everything seemed in order based on what had been presented. With one swift motion, he signed his name. As he did so, an exhilarating wave washed over him. This was it. He was entering into an alliance that would catapult him into a new era of success. Celebratory handshakes followed instantly as representatives congratulated him on this pivotal moment. They spoke enthusiastically about next steps and timelines for launching their collaboration, their energy infectious. Mark felt elated. There was no looking back now. He reveled in being part of something greater than himself, a partnership that promised to redefine the trajectory of his business. Yet beneath that surface joy lay an unsettling awareness that something important had been overlooked. In the days following his signature, Mark's excitement continued to grow as plans unfolded for integrating their resources and strategies. The initial meetings brimmed with optimism. Everyone was eager to push forward toward shared goals. However, every time discussions turned to specific agreements or stipulations buried within that contract, a nagging feeling tugged at him. A vague notion that perhaps he should have taken more time to understand every detail before diving headfirst into this venture. But doubt quickly faded as visions of success flooded back into focus. After all, he was Mark Reynolds, the entrepreneur who thrived in uncertainty and embraced risk like an old friend. The thrill of achievement drowned out any lingering hesitations as he settled back into a familiar rhythm of relentless ambition. Yet little did he know that those unexamined clauses nestled within the fine print would soon emerge from their shadows to cast a long and daunting pall over his dreams, transforming what began as an exhilarating opportunity into an overwhelming burden that would challenge everything he thought he knew about business and success. The allure of quick gains would soon clash dramatically with unforeseen realities lurking just beneath the surface, waiting patiently for their moment to strike. As the dust settled from the excitement of signing the contract, Mark Reynolds dove headfirst into his new partnership. Meetings were held, strategies were discussed, and everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. Yet, amid the flurry of activity, a nagging feeling continued to linger in the back of his mind, a feeling that perhaps he had overlooked something crucial. It wasn't until a few weeks later, during a routine review of their financial projections, that the first cracks began to show. Mark sat in his office, poring over charts and graphs that depicted soaring revenue forecasts. As he flipped through the pages, something caught his eye, an obscure reference to additional costs associated with their partnership buried within a lengthy section of the contract. Curiosity piqued, he decided to pull out the original document to investigate further. With the contract spread out before him, he began reading through sections that he had previously glossed over in his eagerness to sign. As he moved through the dense legal language, clarity began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of dread. The fine print revealed itself as a labyrinth of clauses that would soon prove to be more than just bureaucratic jargon. They were potential landmines waiting to detonate. First and foremost were exorbitant fees tied to various aspects of the partnership that had been presented as negligible during negotiations. These fees included hefty percentages deducted from earnings generated through their collaboration, which would significantly slash profits. What had initially seemed like a lucrative deal now appeared far less attractive when framed against these unexpected costs. Next came the penalties for underperformance. A clause stipulated that if certain benchmarks were not met within specified timelines, Mark's company would be liable for staggering fees intended to compensate for perceived losses on the part of the investment firm. This revelation sent a chill down his spine. Suddenly, it wasn't just about achieving success, it was about avoiding crippling financial penalties if things didn't go according to plan. As he continued sifting through the contract, Mark's heart sank further. He discovered liability clauses that transferred significant risk back onto him and his startup. If any issues arose, whether regarding product failures or customer dissatisfaction, the responsibility would lie squarely on his shoulders. The prospect of facing lawsuits or claims without support felt overwhelming. All this time, he had believed they would share risks as partners. Mark felt as though he was unraveling a tangled web, each clause revealing more distressing implications than the last. The once exciting promise of rapid growth now felt like an impending storm ready to unleash chaos on his business plans. He couldn't shake off the sense of betrayal. How could something so critical have been hidden beneath layers of legalese? Panic began to set in as he processed what this meant for his financial future. The weight of potential losses loomed large in his mind. Millions in projected profits now seemed overshadowed by millions owed due to unforeseen fees and liabilities. The thrill of partnership faded into an unsettling reality check, leaving him grappling with consequences he had never anticipated. Determined not to face this alone, Mark reached out to his legal team for clarification. He scheduled an emergency meeting, anxious yet hopeful that they could provide insight into possible avenues for recourse or renegotiation. As he shared his findings with them, their expressions shifted from concern to alarm as they reviewed the contract in detail. Mark, one lawyer said cautiously after examining the document further, the implications here are serious. You may have signed away not only your profits but also put your entire business at risk. The gravity of those words struck him like a physical blow. Mark struggled to comprehend how quickly things had escalated from excitement to potential disaster. His mind raced with questions. How had he allowed this oversight? Was there any way out? He spent sleepless nights replaying every moment leading up to his signature, the pressure from peers, the urgency driven by competition, all overshadowing critical thinking and due diligence. In a world where speed often equated to success, he had compromised caution for ambition, and now it felt as though he was teetering on the edge of collapse. With each passing day came fresh waves of anxiety as Mark faced mounting pressure from stakeholders and investors who were unaware of these hidden pitfalls. The fear of failure loomed larger than ever before. He was trapped in a deal that promised greatness but instead threatened everything he had built. For Mark Reynolds, it became painfully clear, neglecting to read between the lines had led him into uncharted territory, a daunting landscape filled with liabilities and obligations that could shatter his dreams overnight. As he braced himself for what lay ahead, one question resonated loudly: how could he possibly navigate a path back from this unforeseen abyss? As the weeks rolled on after the signing of the contract, Mark Reynolds felt an initial wave of optimism wash over him. The excitement surrounding his new partnership had generated a palpable buzz within his company. Team members were energized, eagerly brainstorming innovative ideas that would leverage the resources and expertise of their new allies. Yet beneath that surface enthusiasm lay a growing undercurrent of unease, one that would soon manifest in ways he had never anticipated. The first sign of trouble emerged almost immediately when Mark received a notification from his finance department regarding unexpected operational costs. As he sat down with his finance manager, the gravity of the situation began to unfold. "Mark, we've run into some discrepancies in our budgeting," she explained, her voice tinged with concern. "It seems several expenses tied to our partnership are far higher than initially projected." Mark's heart raced as she laid out the details. The initial projections had promised minimal upfront costs and seamless integration. However, hidden fees began to surface at an alarming rate. For starters, there were significant licensing fees associated with technology and tools that they would need to acquire to comply with the partnership's stipulations. These were costs that had been glossed over during negotiations but now loomed large in their financial outlook. Additionally, she continued, we're seeing increased expenses related to staffing and operational adjustments necessary to align our processes with theirs. Mark felt a knot tightening in his stomach as he contemplated how quickly these costs could spiral out of control. The promise of growth was rapidly being overshadowed by a mounting financial burden, one that threatened to derail their plans before they even had a chance to take off. With each passing day, more challenges emerged. The integration process proved to be far less seamless than anticipated. Mark's team encountered complications when trying to meld their systems with those of the investment firm. Technical glitches arose frequently, causing delays in project timelines and frustrating staff who were eager to hit the ground running. What should have been an exciting collaboration turned into a logistical nightmare. As operational issues piled up, Mark found himself fielding complaints from employees who felt overwhelmed by the sudden influx of responsibilities without proper guidance or support. Morale began to dip. Once enthusiastic team members now faced increasing pressure and uncertainty about their roles in this new arrangement. The collaborative spirit that had flourished in the beginning slowly crumbled under the weight of confusion and frustration. Meanwhile, external pressures mounted as well. Investors who had previously shown enthusiasm for the partnership started expressing concerns about rising costs and unclear timelines. During quarterly update meetings, Mark could sense their skepticism growing. Questions about profitability loomed large in the room. The more he tried to reassure them, the more evident it became that confidence was waning. Then came the first substantial setback. A key project designed to showcase their joint capabilities fell behind schedule due to ongoing technical issues. When it finally launched, it did not meet expectations. Customer feedback was lukewarm at best. Clients who had eagerly anticipated innovative solutions felt disappointed and dissatisfied. The negative reception reverberated through both companies, further complicating an already fragile relationship. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Mark called for an emergency meeting with his leadership team. He needed a strategy, a way to mitigate losses and reorient their focus amid growing chaos. As they gathered around the conference table, tension was thick in the air. Everyone knew something needed to change but feared what that might entail. Look, Mark began, trying to rally his team despite feeling overwhelmed himself. We need to tackle these operational issues head-on. Let's identify what we can do differently. They brainstormed potential solutions, streamlining communication channels, hiring additional temporary staff for support, and seeking guidance from mentors who had navigated similar partnerships successfully. Yet even as they discussed solutions, Mark couldn't shake a lingering anxiety about how deep these issues ran. Could they truly recover from this? The thought gnawed at him as sleepless nights turned into days filled with mounting stress. Every day brought new revelations about just how much had been overlooked in those hurried negotiations, each discovery adding another layer of complexity to an already precarious situation. The dream of rapid expansion was slipping further from his grasp, replaced by a stark reality marked by unforeseen costs and operational challenges. As he stared out of his office window at the city skyline, once a symbol of limitless potential, Mark felt an overwhelming weight settle upon him. What had started as an exhilarating venture now felt like a precarious tightrope walk on which he risked everything he had built. The reality of his circumstances began sinking in deep. He was trapped within a quagmire of unexpected challenges, all stemming from his decision to leap without looking first. With every misstep came the sobering realization that navigating this partnership would require more than ambition. It would demand grit, resilience, and perhaps more importantly, an unwavering commitment to confront each challenge head-on before it spiraled beyond repair. As the weight of the challenges pressed down on Mark Reynolds, a sense of urgency compelled him to confront the reality of his situation. The operational setbacks, unexpected costs, and dwindling investor confidence churned in his mind like a storm, and he could no longer ignore the need for clarity. His initial optimism had faded, replaced by an unsettling awareness that perhaps he had underestimated the implications of the contract he had signed. He felt as though he were standing on shaky ground, and the fear of falling loomed ever larger. In the quiet moments after work, Mark found himself reflecting on every detail leading up to that fateful signature. The vibrant discussions with investors and colleagues now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by mounting frustrations and dire consequences. It was clear that he needed answers that could only come from legal experts who understood the labyrinthine complexities of contracts. With resolve, he reached out to his legal team, scheduling an emergency consultation. The meeting was set for the following afternoon, but Mark spent the night tossing and turning, anxious about what he might learn. As dawn broke, uncertainty gnawed at him. He desperately wanted to believe there was a way out of this mess. When he arrived at the law office, Mark was met by his lead attorney, Sarah Thompson, a sharp-minded professional known for her no-nonsense approach. As they settled into a conference room adorned with bookshelves filled with legal texts, Mark wasted no time diving into his concerns. "Sarah," he began, struggling to find his footing amid overwhelming emotions, "I need you to help me understand what I've gotten into." With a reassuring nod, Sarah reviewed the contract once more while Mark detailed the operational issues and costs that had begun to surface since signing. He shared his growing fears about penalties for underperformance and liability clauses that seemed to shift all risk onto his shoulders. As she listened attentively, Sarah's expression shifted from casual interest to serious contemplation. Mark, she said after a moment of silence, it's important we discuss not just what you've encountered so far but also what lies ahead. The ramifications of this contract are significant. Her words struck him like a bolt of lightning. He leaned forward, eager to hear more. What do you mean? First, she explained methodically, the fees and penalties outlined can quickly escalate if your company fails to meet performance benchmarks. This isn't just about missed targets, it's about financial liability that could cripple your operations. Mark felt a cold wave wash over him as she elaborated on the specifics, how missed deadlines or disappointing revenue figures could lead to devastating financial consequences that would compound over time. It became clear that every decision made in haste was now poised to haunt him. And then there's the matter of liability, Sarah continued. You've essentially agreed to take on risks associated with product failures and customer complaints without adequate support from your partners. She paused for emphasis. If something goes wrong, and it often does in business, you could find yourself facing lawsuits or claims that drain resources from your company. As she spoke, Mark envisioned scenarios that sent chills down his spine. Lawsuits filed against him by unhappy customers or investors demanding accountability for losses incurred due to unaddressed issues. The thought was paralyzing and suffocating. We need to assess your options carefully, Sarah advised as she shifted gears. While you may feel trapped now, there might be avenues for renegotiation or damage control. Hope flickered within him, perhaps there was still a way forward after all. But as she continued outlining potential strategies, Mark couldn't shake off an overwhelming sense of dread that filled the room, a realization that regardless of their efforts, untangling himself from this deal would be neither simple nor quick. Mark, Sarah concluded firmly, this is going to take time and significant resources if you want to navigate it effectively. You'll need to prepare for tough conversations with your partners while also managing your team's morale. The implications settled heavily on Mark's shoulders as he absorbed her words. This wasn't just about legal jargon anymore, it was about preserving everything he had worked tirelessly to build. The stakes were higher than ever before. As he left the law office that day, Mark felt both enlightened and overwhelmed, a tumultuous mix of emotions swirling within him like an unpredictable tide. He understood now that beyond just seeking answers lay a grueling journey filled with negotiations and difficult decisions ahead. Back at his office, pensive yet determined, Mark gathered his leadership team once more. He needed their input, not just for strategy but also for collective resilience in facing what lay ahead. They would have to tackle every challenge head-on if they wanted any chance at salvaging their vision for growth. Now armed with knowledge and clarity about their precarious situation, Mark steeled himself for what was sure to be a long and arduous road ahead. One where the lessons learned would undoubtedly shape not only his business but also his approach toward risk and diligence in the future. The gravity of his choices weighed heavily upon him. This was only the beginning of a battle fraught with complexities, but one he was ready to face. With a newfound awareness of the precariousness of his situation, Mark Reynolds knew that his only viable path forward was to renegotiate the terms of the deal he had hastily signed. He felt the urgency to mitigate his losses and regain some semblance of control over his company's future. The stakes were high, and he could no longer afford to shy away from difficult conversations. Mark began by assembling a strategy, leaning heavily on the advice he had received from his legal team. He knew that approaching the investment firm would require careful planning and a well-crafted argument highlighting the mutual benefits of renegotiation. The last thing he wanted was to come across as desperate or confrontational. He needed to position himself as a partner in search of a more sustainable path forward. He scheduled a meeting with the representatives from the investment firm, specifically requesting time with the lead negotiator, Greg, who had initially sold him on the partnership's potential. Mark believed that rekindling their rapport would be essential in persuading them to consider changes to the agreement. The day of the meeting arrived, and Mark felt an anxious knot in his stomach as he made his way to their office. Memories of their previous discussions flooded back. Optimism and excitement had filled that room then, but now it felt like a battlefield. As he entered the conference room, he was greeted warmly by Greg and his team, who appeared eager yet unaware of the turmoil brewing beneath Mark's composed exterior. "Mark, it's great to see you again," Greg said, extending his hand with an air of familiarity. "I hope everything is going well since we partnered." Mark forced a smile but quickly shifted gears. "Thanks, Greg. I appreciate you taking the time to meet today." He took a seat at the table, heart racing as he prepared to lay out his concerns. "I wanted to discuss our agreement and some challenges we've been facing since signing." As he began outlining the operational issues and unexpected costs that had arisen, Mark remained calm yet assertive. He emphasized how these factors could hinder not only his company's performance but also impact their partnership's success in the long run. "I believe we can find common ground here," he said, trying to inspire collaboration rather than conflict. Greg listened attentively but occasionally glanced at his colleagues, whose expressions hinted at skepticism. After Mark finished explaining his perspective, Greg responded cautiously. "I understand your concerns, but we need to stay true to the terms we agreed upon. Our investors have expectations based on those projections." Mark anticipated this pushback. He had prepared for it. He pivoted, focusing on how renegotiating could benefit both parties in concrete terms. "What if we adjusted certain performance benchmarks or established clearer support mechanisms? By doing so, we'd allow us both some breathing room while keeping our long-term goals aligned." He presented data compiled by his finance team that illustrated how temporary adjustments could lead to better outcomes for everyone involved. The numbers showed potential revenue increases if they could stabilize operations rather than facing penalties for underperformance. Gradually, Mark noticed subtle shifts in their demeanor as they reviewed his data. It seemed they were beginning to see merit in what he proposed. He pressed on with further arguments about how maintaining a healthy partnership would ultimately yield higher returns for everyone involved. After all, if one side faltered, it risked dragging down the other. After an hour of discussions filled with tension and uncertainty, Greg finally leaned back in his chair, contemplating Mark's points before responding. "I do see where you're coming from," he admitted slowly. "But any changes would require approval from higher-ups on our end." Undeterred, Mark suggested they draft a preliminary proposal outlining potential adjustments to their agreement, the type of document that could serve as a starting point for further negotiations. This idea seemed to resonate with Greg, who nodded thoughtfully. While they didn't reach any concrete resolutions that day, Mark left feeling cautiously optimistic. He knew that opening these lines of communication was vital. Even if they didn't agree immediately on new terms, simply initiating the conversation represented progress. In the following weeks, Mark kept the momentum alive by maintaining regular contact with Greg and providing additional data or insights whenever possible. He understood that building rapport was just as important as presenting facts. Cultivating goodwill might be essential in persuading them toward change. However, as days turned into weeks without substantial results from ongoing discussions, frustration began seeping back into Mark's mindset. Each passing day felt like another missed opportunity, a reminder of how quickly circumstances could shift in business, and each email or call returned without meaningful updates chipped away at his resolve. But even amid mounting pressure and uncertainty surrounding negotiations, he remained determined not to give up hope entirely. The journey toward renegotiation would undoubtedly be challenging. However, Mark had come too far to surrender easily. With every effort made toward dialogue came renewed purpose, a commitment not only to protect his company but also to learn from this experience moving forward. As he prepared for subsequent meetings with both Greg's team and internal stakeholders alike, Mark found himself embracing resilience forged through adversity, a lesson that would shape not only this chapter of his career but also future ventures yet unwritten. As the weeks turned into months, the consequences of Mark Reynolds' hasty business decision began to manifest in stark and alarming ways. What initially seemed like a promising partnership had devolved into a financial quagmire that threatened to swallow his company whole. The once vibrant atmosphere at his office became suffused with tension and anxiety as employees grappled with uncertainty, and Mark found himself facing a grim reality, one marked by mounting debts, dwindling investor confidence, and the looming specter of bankruptcy. The financial toll began to reveal itself almost immediately after the initial setbacks. Operational costs continued to surge beyond what he had projected. Unanticipated fees related to the partnership piled up, and penalties for underperformance were starting to materialize. Each month brought new invoices that bore little resemblance to the agreements he thought he had understood. The original figures presented to him during negotiations now felt like an illusion, obscured by layers of hidden clauses that he had overlooked. Mark's finance team worked tirelessly to keep track of expenses, but the numbers painted a bleak picture. Cash flow became a pressing concern as revenue projections fell short. Clients were dissatisfied with the delays in product launches, which led to cancellations and lost contracts. As contracts slipped through his fingers, so did the financial stability he had fought so hard to build. It was a cruel irony. His pursuit of growth had spiraled into a nightmare that seemed to grow more complex with each passing day. In board meetings, Mark faced increasingly pointed inquiries from investors who were once enthusiastic supporters of his vision. Their expressions shifted from optimism to skepticism as they questioned whether his company could recover from the setbacks. "What's your plan for navigating these challenges?" one investor asked with palpable concern during a particularly tense session. The weight of their expectations pressed down on Mark's shoulders like a heavy shroud, making it harder to breathe. With each meeting filled with uncomfortable silences and mounting criticism, Mark felt as though his credibility was eroding before his eyes. Investors began pulling back their support, some even hinted at withdrawing their funding altogether if tangible progress wasn't demonstrated soon. The realization struck him deeply. Not only was he risking his own financial future, but he was also jeopardizing the livelihoods of his employees who depended on him for stability. As debts accumulated alongside losses, Mark found himself in an increasingly precarious position. He started receiving notices from creditors demanding payments that had become overdue, reminders of obligations he could no longer meet without significant sacrifices. The weight of financial responsibility pressed upon him relentlessly. Every tick of the clock echoed with urgency as deadlines loomed closer. In desperation, Mark explored various avenues for relief. He sought loans from banks and other financial institutions to cover immediate operational costs, but this only aggravated his situation further. High interest rates and stringent repayment terms added another layer of complexity to an already difficult landscape. Each new debt felt like a noose tightening around his neck. He was caught in a vicious cycle where borrowing only delayed the inevitable reckoning. Meanwhile, whispers about potential bankruptcy began circulating among stakeholders and employees alike. The word alone sent shivers down Mark's spine. He never imagined finding himself in such dire straits after achieving so much success in his career. It was a bitter pill to swallow. How could something that once felt so promising turn into such despair? As Mark navigated this tumultuous period, sleepless nights became the norm. He found himself ruminating over every decision made. What could have been done differently? How could he have avoided this descent into chaos? With each question came a tidal wave of regret that crashed over him repeatedly. In moments of clarity amid the chaos, however, Mark recognized that surrendering wasn't an option. He still held onto fragments of hope. Perhaps there existed pathways toward redemption or recovery that hadn't yet been fully explored. Drawing upon whatever reserves of strength remained within him, he resolved to fight against the tide threatening to pull him under. During late-night brainstorming sessions with his leadership team, they discussed potential strategies for salvaging their situation, a renewed focus on client relationships or innovative marketing campaigns aimed at revitalizing interest in their products. They brainstormed ways to enhance communication with investors, emphasizing transparency regarding challenges faced while also showcasing resilience in addressing those issues. Yet even as plans took shape on paper, doubts lingered just beneath the surface, a constant reminder of how quickly fortunes can shift in business. Every strategy devised felt like a gamble. Uncertainty loomed large over every decision made moving forward. Mark understood all too well that overcoming this crisis would require not just tenacity but also a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about himself and his approach toward risk-taking in business. A harsh lesson learned through experience rather than theory. As he stared out across the city skyline from his office window, once filled with promise now tinged with uncertainty, Mark steeled himself for whatever lay ahead. The road would undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, but he knew that finding a way through would ultimately define not just his career but also shape his character as an entrepreneur determined not simply to survive but to thrive against all odds. As the storm of financial turmoil raged on, Mark Reynolds found himself grappling with emotional and personal consequences that extended far beyond the confines of his business. The weight of his decisions bore heavily on him, fracturing relationships and leaving a profound impact on his mental health. What had begun as an exhilarating venture had devolved into a relentless source of stress and anxiety, reshaping every aspect of his life. At the center of this turmoil was Mark's relationship with his family. Once a pillar of support, they now felt the strain of his preoccupation with work. Dinners that used to be filled with laughter and conversation turned into silent affairs where Mark's mind drifted to mounting debts and investor meetings. His wife, Sarah, watched helplessly as he grew increasingly distant, burdened by the pressures of a failing business. "You're not present anymore," she finally said one evening, her voice tinged with sadness. "It feels like you're here but not really with us." Mark felt a pang of guilt pierce through him at her words. He knew she was right. He had allowed the pressures of work to overshadow the most important aspects of his life. The emotional disconnect was palpable, yet he found it difficult to pull himself away from the relentless cycle of worry that consumed him. He wanted to be there for Sarah and their children, but every time he tried to engage in family activities, his thoughts would drift back to the looming crisis. The stress manifested physically as well. Sleepless nights became routine, marked by tossing and turning as anxiety coursed through him. He would wake up early in the morning, drenched in sweat, heart racing as nightmares about financial ruin plagued his subconscious. As fatigue set in, Mark's ability to focus during the day diminished. He struggled to make decisions and keep track of crucial details at work. His once sharp mind now felt clouded and sluggish. Doubt crept in at every turn. During meetings with his leadership team, he fought to maintain an air of authority despite feeling like a shadow of his former self. The burden of uncertainty loomed large over each discussion as he navigated questions about strategy and next steps while grappling internally with self-doubt. Am I still the leader they believe me to be? He wondered silently as his team looked to him for guidance during turbulent times. Outside the office, friends noticed a change in him too. Social gatherings that had once been enjoyable became strained. Mark found himself retreating into silence or deflecting conversations whenever someone asked about his business ventures. The laughter that used to echo among friends faded away as he withdrew further into himself, a protective instinct against revealing just how much turmoil lay beneath the surface. In private moments, when he allowed himself to reflect on everything going wrong, despair washed over him like a cold wave. Thoughts of failure gnawed at him relentlessly. What if this is it? What if I lose everything I've built? The fear of bankruptcy hovered above him like a dark cloud, casting shadows over even the sunniest days. Seeking solace became increasingly difficult. Mark felt trapped in a cycle where every avenue appeared closed off or fraught with complications. He tried exercising regularly and taking walks to clear his mind, yet even those moments were marred by reminders of unmet obligations and looming deadlines. As time passed without resolution, feelings of isolation began to seep into his psyche. He struggled to articulate what he was experiencing. How could he convey the weight that pressed upon him? Mark was enveloped in an overwhelming sense of shame for having put himself in this position, shame for letting down those who depended on him, shame for not having done enough due diligence before signing that fateful contract. In quiet moments alone late at night, tears would spill down his cheeks as he wrestled with feelings of inadequacy and regret, thoughts cascading through his mind like an unending storm. Why didn't I read the fine print? How could I have been so naive? Yet amidst this emotional chaos came small flickers of resilience, a resolve that began to emerge from within. Deep down, Mark recognized that while he might feel lost now, there was still an opportunity for growth hidden within this experience. It was a painful lesson, but one that might shape him into a stronger leader in the long run. Determined not to let despair consume him entirely, Mark sought support from friends who had faced their own struggles in business. These conversations provided perspective, reminders that even successful entrepreneurs faced adversity along their journeys. With each shared story came renewed hope. Perhaps there was a way through this darkness after all. With newfound determination swirling within him like embers waiting to ignite into flames, Mark began taking tentative steps toward rebuilding not just his business but also reconnecting with those around him. He initiated conversations with Sarah about how they could work together as a team, sharing burdens rather than allowing them to fester in silence. As familial bonds strengthened again through openness and vulnerability, Mark began realizing that while challenges may persist ahead, facing them alongside loved ones might provide both clarity and comfort amid uncertainty. A reminder that sometimes it takes falling apart before finding a way back together again. As Mark Reynolds stood at the precipice of what felt like a monumental crossroads, he couldn't help but reflect on the harrowing journey that had brought him to this point. The weight of his choices, specifically the decision to sign a business deal without thoroughly reading the fine print, had exacted a heavy toll on both his professional life and personal well-being. Yet, amid the chaos and difficulties, invaluable lessons began to crystallize in his mind. The first and perhaps most profound realization was the critical importance of diligence in business agreements. Mark had always prided himself on being a decisive leader, someone who could seize opportunities and act quickly in a fast-paced environment. However, he now understood that speed must never come at the expense of thoroughness. In the world of business, every contract is laden with implications that can redefine relationships and outcomes. He recognized that taking the time to scrutinize every detail could mean the difference between prosperity and peril. The experience had also taught him that negotiation is not merely about securing favorable terms but about understanding the entire landscape of potential risks, both known and unknown. Mark had approached negotiations with confidence, believing that his instincts could guide him through any potential pitfalls. Yet, he came to see that true negotiation requires an awareness of what's at stake for all parties involved, including their motivations and constraints. It's about crafting agreements that are not only beneficial but also sustainable. Another lesson emerged from his interactions with investors and stakeholders throughout this ordeal. Their trust in him was fragile, easily shaken by missteps or miscommunication. Mark learned firsthand how vital it is to maintain transparency in all dealings. Honesty fosters credibility and strengthens relationships. As he navigated rocky conversations with investors who had once believed in his vision, he realized that open lines of communication could be just as important as delivering results. Reflecting on his relationships with family and friends, Mark recognized the need for balance in his life, a lesson that extended beyond business dealings. He had let work overshadow personal connections during a critical time when support was paramount. Now more than ever, he understood that vulnerability is not a weakness. Sharing struggles can forge deeper bonds and create a network of support during challenging times. As he processed these revelations, Mark began to see how they could serve as guiding principles moving forward. He envisioned himself becoming an advocate for due diligence, not just within his company but also among peers in the industry. Sharing his story could illuminate the pitfalls of haste while encouraging others to approach contracts with caution and a critical eye. If he could spare even one entrepreneur from experiencing what he had endured, it would make all the pain worth it. In an effort to reclaim control over his circumstances, Mark took proactive steps to implement changes within his organization. He initiated training sessions focused on contract review processes, ensuring his team understood their importance in safeguarding the company's interests. He also fostered an environment where questioning decisions became a valued practice, a culture centered around collaboration and collective wisdom rather than individual bravado. Through this journey of introspection and evolution, Mark found himself developing resilience, a quality born from facing adversity head-on. While uncertainty still loomed large over his business future, he felt empowered by newfound knowledge and insights gained through hardship. Rather than allowing fear to paralyze him, he embraced it as a catalyst for growth, a motivator pushing him toward improvement in both personal and professional realms. As Mark reflected on all he had learned during this tumultuous period, one core truth resonated deeply: every setback carries within it the seeds of opportunity for transformation. What felt like a crushing defeat had ultimately paved the way for growth, a chance to become not just a better business leader but also a more grounded individual. Looking ahead, he felt invigorated by the prospect of rebuilding, not just financially but emotionally as well. The path would be fraught with challenges. Still, armed with lessons learned from experience, he was ready to confront whatever lay ahead with renewed vigor and determination. Mark's story serves as a powerful reminder that success is not merely defined by victories won but also by resilience forged through adversity. In business, as in life, diligence matters. It shapes outcomes and influences destinies. As he prepared for what lay ahead, Mark Reynolds resolved to approach every opportunity with both ambition and caution, a duality that would define not only his career but also the legacy he aimed to create in an ever-evolving world of business. As Mark Reynolds emerged from the shadows of his tumultuous experience, he found himself at a crossroads that demanded both introspection and action. The path forward was daunting, yet it pulsed with the possibility of redemption and renewal. With the lessons learned from his harrowing ordeal fresh in his mind, Mark was determined to rebuild not just his business reputation but also his financial standing. The first step in this journey was to confront the reality of his situation head-on. Mark gathered his leadership team for an open discussion about their current challenges. He acknowledged the missteps that had led them to this point, emphasizing the importance of transparency moving forward. "We must understand that trust is earned," he told them. "Let's commit to being more diligent and communicative as we work through this together." This candid conversation laid the groundwork for a renewed sense of camaraderie and shared purpose among his employees. Recognizing that rebuilding would require more than just internal adjustments, Mark initiated outreach efforts to re-establish relationships with investors. He scheduled one-on-one meetings where he could explain not only the difficulties they faced but also the strategies they were implementing to address these issues. "I want you all to know that we are taking this seriously," he conveyed earnestly during these meetings. "We've learned valuable lessons that will shape our approach to business moving forward." To demonstrate accountability, Mark presented a detailed recovery plan outlining steps for financial stabilization. This plan included a comprehensive review of their operational costs, a focus on improving cash flow, and a commitment to enhancing customer satisfaction through better communication and service delivery. By quantifying their path forward, he aimed to instill confidence in skeptical investors who had previously expressed doubts. Mark also sought ways to innovate within their product line, driven by feedback from customers dissatisfied with earlier delays. He organized brainstorming sessions with his team, encouraging everyone to contribute ideas for new features or services that could differentiate them in a crowded market. This collaborative approach not only sparked creativity but also fostered a sense of ownership among employees as they rallied around a common goal. As financial pressures persisted, Mark explored various avenues for securing additional funding while being cautious not to fall into the same traps as before. He reached out to former investors who had previously shown interest but had pulled back due to uncertainties. Armed with data showcasing improvements in operations and customer engagement strategies, he made a compelling case for renewed investment, one grounded in lessons learned rather than simply promises of future success. In parallel with these efforts, Mark knew it was crucial to rebuild his company's public image. To achieve this, he engaged in strategic marketing initiatives aimed at re-establishing brand credibility. He focused on sharing success stories of satisfied customers and positive outcomes from recent projects on social media and other platforms. By highlighting progress and transparency, he hoped to shift public perception away from past failures toward a narrative of resilience and determination. Throughout this journey toward recovery, Mark continually reminded himself of the importance of self-care and mental well-being. No longer willing to let stress consume him entirely, he began practicing mindfulness techniques and prioritizing time with family, a fundamental aspect of his life that had suffered during the crisis. By fostering balance between work and personal life, he found renewed clarity and strength to navigate challenges ahead. As months passed, signs of progress emerged. Investors began responding positively to the revitalized outreach efforts, expressing renewed confidence in Mark's leadership. The company's financial situation improved gradually as operational efficiencies were implemented and customer satisfaction scores started climbing. Mark reflected on how far he had come since that fateful day when he signed the contract without reading the fine print. Each step taken toward recovery fortified not just his business but also his character as an entrepreneur shaped by adversity. He embraced the idea that every setback served as an opportunity for growth, a mantra that now guided him through both professional endeavors and personal pursuits. Looking ahead, Mark felt invigorated by a newfound sense of purpose, one rooted in diligence, transparency, and collaboration. He understood that while challenges would inevitably arise in business, facing them with resilience and an unwavering commitment to learning would be paramount in shaping a successful future. As he prepared for upcoming meetings with potential partners and investors, he carried with him not only strategic plans but also an unyielding spirit forged through experience. The road ahead remained uncertain, however, armed with hard-earned wisdom and lessons from the past, Mark Reynolds was ready not simply to survive but thrive, transforming adversity into opportunity as he charted a course toward lasting success.